Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. China has started using a new diplomatic term, warrior diplomacy, rather wolf warrior diplomacy, and that has become a shorthand expression for a very new, very assertive brand of Chinese diplomacy. In the past, Chinese diplomats tended to keep a very low profile, polite, humble, very cautious, very moderate. But now they have become very strident, very assertive, almost hostile. And they exhibit behavior that ranges from storming out of the international meetings to shouting at the foreign counterparts and even insulting foreign leaders. And this turn in the foreign policy of China has been slowly building up since 2008. But it accelerated when in 2012 President Xi came in power. And after the outbreak of COVID-19, Chinese diplomats felt under attack. They were very angry that China had been criticized. So there was a new mixture of confidence and insecurity combined with anger, and that resulted in wolf warrior diplomacy. They believe that they have been pressurized for a long time. They have been lectured by the West on the communist system and historically looked down upon in the Western world. They still recall the period of national humiliation, either from their own experience or from the experience of their parents and the grandparents. Example, I'll give you, I came to know about it. There was one gentleman, Wu Zieman. He was a kid. And guards at the French embassy used to punish him for playing outside his doors by setting dogs on him. He became China's ambassador to France, and I met him. And he said that he remembers the dogs being set on him, and I cannot tolerate the French. So, when he was ambassador, he was curt, rude, insulting. He was very aggressive. And as a matter of fact, it was a defensive aggressive. The whole personality was changed. Now, if that happened with one person, you can well imagine how would it happen with the whole community. So, this raises a major question. How does the concept of wolf warrior diplomacy interact with the narrative of China's peaceful rise? Is it contradictory or is it complementary? In my opinion, many people in China's foreign policy establishment would say that the two concepts are contradictory. The idea of the peaceful rise was developed when Chinese economy was growing very rapidly. Military power was rising. And China wanted the world to understand that they were peaceful. They had the danger, that fear, that in case they appear to be warlike, they'll be punished. So they wanted to be peaceful, keep a very low profile. They didn't want major disruption in the international system. They didn't want to pose a systemic threat to the liberal international system. But then they became a world power, the largest economy. And under Xi, focused on the idea that Chinese system is more successful, and they did not feel apologetic. So here the whole thing changed. The question arises, how does China's lone warrior policy play out? And what sort of activity the Chinese officials conduct on the online platform? The behavior that attracts the most attention has been on Twitter rather than on Weibo. Weibo is a personal Chinese promoted counterpart of Twitter. The Chinese foreign minister was slower even than other parts of the Chinese government to adopt social media, especially Twitter. They did not have a much social media following. The first one to get the social media following was Zhang Zizong, spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And then others come. But when they started adopting Twitter over the last few years, diplomats who might not otherwise have been noticed gained a voice and could engage with most of their foreign counterparts. Therefore, Twitter and social media in general became an integral tool of the foreign policy. Now imagine foreign policy being conducted through the medium of Twitter was an absolutely new experience, both for the Chinese and for the international community. The majority of the Chinese diplomats using these platforms are aiming not to influence Chinese citizens, but to capture the attention of either the foreign ministry or the leaders in Beijing. So the whole perception changed. The concern was not with the common citizens. It was to influence the leaders to get more promotion or to influence the foreigners. And then the foreign politicians had to be equally active on the social media. Purpose was balancing the level of influence. And in my experience as a strategist, I've seen that the Western politicians are already very much on Twitter. So there was not much they would need to do in terms of balancing Chinese influence. The Chinese diplomats struggle with persuading the international audience because Chinese propaganda apparatus strictly control the messaging, resulting in content that the Western viewers do not find compelling. So when that happened, immediately the diplomats started becoming very aggressive. And then, they combined the psychoanalysis term of the passive-aggressive. They were very passive when they were being criticized and very aggressive when their turn came. And that changed the whole concept of the diplomacy. Now, from the Chinese perspective, Western politicians have an advantage. Reason? The Western media institutions are far more interested globally and have a greater international reach than the Chinese one. And some countries like India, for example, banned TikTok and others, the Chinese social media. Weibo is banned in India, for example. So they cannot reach, the diplomats could not depend on that to reach the foreign audience. So they wanted to use the traditional media. And the result was an intense participation in the conventional media sector. I was talking to some strategists and they asked me a very question, are the diplomats, Chinese diplomats, obligated, compelled to practice wolf warrior diplomacy? Well, let me tell you that wolf warrior diplomacy is a tactic. All Chinese diplomats are capable of using the tactic when they need to do it. You would find very calm, very poised, polished diplomat all of a sudden burst like a volcano, and you are shocked. So what has been notable in recent years is that the diplomats have been strongly embraced the wolf warrior diplomacy. And that has made it dominant, and that has puzzled the Western diplomats. As a matter of fact, it has made a dominant way that they interact with the outside world. And this kind of behavior is being rewarded by the party leaders. Can you believe that Zhao Linzhan, the person who went to France as an ambassador, when he started using the wolf diplomacy, was promoted very rapidly and became a force to reckon with in the Chinese foreign ministry. I think, and the activities of the Chinese foreign office bear me out, that quite a few Chinese diplomats have serious misgivings about this wolf warrior diplomacy, although it's favored by President Xi. They are worried that the way China is communicating is wrong and the damage that the wolf warrior diplomacy is capable of doing to Beijing's reputation abroad is incalculable. You cannot lose your balance when you are dealing in diplomatic terms. And that makes a problem. The problem for those who doubt the tactic is Xi Jinping. Now, he was the ardent supporter of world diplomacy, but now, with his third term, he is asking the diplomats to be more balanced, to be more sober, to be more peaceful, to be more calm, to be more diplomatic in a way. And if you go by his speeches and his actions, you would find that he will continue rewarding people who conduct diplomats in an assertive manner in those countries which are weak, are economically backward, but very polite in the countries which are strong. So this double-faced policy is another hallmark of the Chinese foreign policy, but the wolf warrior diplomacy continues. Now, the people have been told within the Chinese foreign ministry that they need to keep their thought to themselves, who don't believe in this double-faced policy, or they will face political repercussions. So this is creating quite a lot of issues. But then the Western, the African, the Asian diplomats, they are puzzled. They don't know at what time the same placid, peaceful, calm person will burst out and forget all the diplomatic niceties. And that hostile diplomacy, though it has been enforced now, was earlier also visible. You remember at the time of Korean War, they would use abusive terms for President Truman and others. But what's going to be? When China witnesses the negative reaction to such undiplomatic diplomatic tactics, would they change their strategy? Let me tell you, no. They are aware that the response is very negative. They are aware that it can sometimes damage Chinese interest in a number of cases. But as during the earlier times, the assertive diplomacy is going to be a part of that. So that's why they have made it now a two-pronged attack. When their interests are hurt, be assertive. Otherwise, be cool, calm, polite, diplomats the way they are expected to. There have been times when China was more diplomatic isolated, and the behavior of its diplomats undermines its international reputation. This led to a very impressive period of rethinking and recalibration. And CPC, the Communist Party of China, shifted gears to charm the outside world. They showered the friends, economic benefits, and genuine support Confucius institutes opened all over the world. And examples would include the Geneva Band, the Banding Conference. They were going to attack India, and they were crying all the time, Hindi Chini bhai bhai. Indians and Chinese are brothers. And that's the same thing they adopted in 1990s after the Tiananmen Square massacre. But inherently, wolf warrior diplomacy remained. However, now as I said, it's double policy. What they have done is they are using more combative words, but not converting those words into action. For example, you remember this year in April, a Chinese Coast Guard ship sank a Vietnamese fishing trawler near Paracel Islands. And when Vietnam protested, the Chinese Foreign Ministry responded that Vietnam's claim was illegal, but still we are sorry for it. Then, 2 weeks, April 19, the Chinese Ministry of Natural Resources announced a renaming of 80 islands, reefs, seamounts, shoals and ridges. Naturally, that triggered angry response from Vietnam, from Cambodia, from Thailand and from Philippines. But that happened. So when China becomes more powerful, some countries have viewed it in a different manner. They were not prepared and they were not willing to accept China's rise. And many Chinese, as a return, reacted and thought that the Western media is betraying them, is biased, is ideological slanted. And Chinese image has suffered. But the way they do it, they bribe the politicians, they inculcate the youth and use the confusion of us and even every corporate as their spy. So many blame China for initially covering up, for example, this COVID. But from the Chinese perspective now, Wolf war diplomacy is a direct response to unfair approaches, especially of USA towards China. For example, you remember earlier this year, it was I think February, yes, USA and China were engaged in a race to expel journalists, starting with the publication of an op-ed, China is real sick man of Asia, in Wall Street Journal. Chinese wanted Wall Street Journal to apologize, they refused. So China expelled 3 journalists. Then US State Department expelled 5 Chinese media journalists. So this started. And then Zhao claimed that the coronavirus might have been brought to China by US military. So USA started blaming China and China started blaming USA. And hawks in the Trump administration, notably Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, they used Yuan virus in defiance of even the WHO guidelines. The point is this fizzling out? No. Traditionally, they have been, as I said, very, very polite. But now they say US military is crazy. And they say we'll uphold the spirit of humility and tolerance and adhere to communicating, learning in a transparent manner. But if our national dignity is compromised, we will not tolerate. So in fact, warrior diplomacy is already hurting Chinese foreign policy. And 60% Americans have unfair view of China. And China's response, we don't care. As a matter of fact, it's unfortunate that the China and US are engaged in diplomatic tussle when they should be working hand in hand together. But due to political, ideological and cultural difference, Western suspicions of the Chinese government and the Chinese system will not disappear. So what surprises Chinese watchers is that the same brand of rigorous rethinking has been so slow to materialize in the new years. President Xi, in the Political Bureau study session in China, was very clear, and he said that we have now to change our attitude in the developed world and, quote, lovable and trustworthy. But I see no evidence of that. And I feel that wolf warrior diplomacy is going to continue to be celebrated and practiced by China. And whenever their interests are hurt, they'll indulge in that. So we have to be prepared for this new type of diplomacy, away from the old one, where politeness, decency, but then it reflects the social order. Our politics has become insulting, dehumanizing, so is the diplomacy. So wolf warrior diplomacy is here to stay, and quite possible some other countries might also adopt it. And that will be the end of civility and decency. Thank you.